Will you pray for me? God, may the words of my lips and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, because you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. She would stand there with her eyes closed for so long. At the end of every show, at the end of every night, the final song would come, and she would stand there through that great, long introduction with her eyes closed in front of the mic. She was in the Cafe Club, the only integrated nightclub in the city at the time. You could go to the Cotton Club in the 30s, and you could play there if you were black, but you couldn't go listen to music if you were black. But you could go to the Cafe Club no matter what color you were, and they would treat you just the same. And so Billie Holiday would stand on the stage at the end of every show with her eyes closed, like she was praying. And the great long introduction would play. And then she would open her eyes and she would sing these words. This is what she would say: "Southern trees bear a strange fruit. Blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze. Strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees." Pastoral scene of the gallant South. The bulging eyes and the twisted mouth. Scent of magnolias, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the trees to drop. Here is a strange and bitter crop. Billie Holiday sang Strange Fruit for the first time 75 years ago. It was a song that she had worked on with a guy named Abel Meeropol, a white man from New York City. He had seen a newspaper photograph that changed him forever, something that he couldn't unsee, something that wouldn't leave his mind. It was a picture of a lynching, but it looked like a birthday party. You could see two bodies, two young black men hanging in the trees, up in the air, and a party going on down below. A bunch of white people looking like they were having the time of their lives, except one guy with a little mustache. He probably thought he looked like Charlie Chaplin today. You can't help but see Hitler on his face. He had a little mustache, and there he stood, pointing up at those bodies and looking right in the camera to warn you, presumably, about what'll happen. Those boys were named Thomas Shipp and Abram Smith. And they were accused of murdering a white man and looking the wrong way at a white woman. And the mob went crazy, as mobs will do. It became suddenly appallingly violent, and they strung those boys up in Indiana that night in 1930. And later, Abel Meeropol saw the picture that the newspaper man took that day, and he couldn't unsee it. It wouldn't leave his mind. And so all he could do was to try to get it out by writing a poem. And so he wrote it down, and it made its way to Billie Holiday, and she saw the picture. She had probably seen it before. And she couldn't get it out of her head. All she could do was to try to sing it out. And so she would open her mouth at the end of every one of her sets. She would open her mouth and sing hard, but only after closing her eyes, like she was praying, like she was trying to forget what she had seen. And when she couldn't, she would open those eyes and start to sing, and that song changed everything. 75 years ago in the Cafe Club in Greenwich Village, New York. Here's what God knew there in the garden that day. Here's what God was trying to say to Adam and Eve. God was trying to say, there are some things you can't unsee. There are some things that once you know them, you can't forget them. There's some fruit that once you bite into it, the taste will never leave your mouth. There's no bleach that will get it out of your head. There's no toothpaste that will wash it out of your mouth. Once you see these things, once you taste this fruit, it will be with you forever. So God said, Adam and Eve, be careful of that tree. Be careful of the fruit that that tree bears. Because you will be forever changed if you go there. And you know what happened. Here's what God knew, though. God knew that another man would one day be strung up on another tree. They strung those boys up by the necks. And one of them, he reached up and he grabbed his own rope and he tried to pull himself up so it wouldn't choke him. So they let him down and they broke his arms. And they strung him back up. And then they had a party. And that tree that they hung from, it was just like another tree 2,000 years before. It was just like another tree, and it was just like another mob that went suddenly, appallingly, violently crazy one day, as mobs are wont to do. When they grabbed that man and they nailed him up on that tree. And they went back to break his legs so his legs couldn't hold him up, but God had already taken him and started the transformation of everything. And here's what God knew. That tree in the garden with that bitter fruit, and that tree in Indiana that day with those boys hanging from it, and that tree with Jesus on it, they are the same tree. They are all the lynching tree. And God said, don't go to that tree. Don't eat of that fruit, because once you do, you will never forget what you have seen. You will never get that taste out of your mouth. You will never be the same again. God said, don't do that, Adam and Eve. God said, don't do that to the mob in Indiana. Don't do that to the mob that day in Jerusalem. And, well, we're humans. And we do keep hanging that bitter fruit up in the trees, don't we? But Abel Meeropol and Billie Holiday and God, they knew how to take the worst that the world could dish out, the worst of the worst, and pull beauty out of it. Not smooth beauty, not easy beauty, not simple beauty, but the kind of beauty that cracks you wide open and lets out what you have seen. Lets out what you have tasted, lets out what you have created and known. Abel Meeropol and Billie Holiday and God, they taught us how to stand at the foot of the lynching tree and open our mouths wide and sing. To sing beauty into the world, to sing a demand for justice into the world. It's not easy beauty, but it works. And that song, Strange Fruit, that Billie Holiday sang 75 years ago about that one lynching tree, we have a lot of songs about the other lynching tree, don't we? This is the song that every single Christian hymn you have ever sung is. Every hymn you have ever sung is Strange Fruit. It is standing at the base of that cross and wishing that you could unsee what you have seen, wishing you could spit out what you have tasted, standing there with your eyes closed, trying to get rid of it and realizing you can't, and opening your mouth to sing.